Hello, I'm Justin Wheeler, and welcome to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit. Today, I'm talking with Alyssa Sweetman, who heads up the nonprofit community at Twitch. In case you don't know, Twitch is a live stream site with 15 million daily viewers. In this episode, we'll talk about how your nonprofit can get started with Livestream Fundraising. Let's get to it.
The best thing that we can do is just raise as much money as possible and then give it to the people around the world.
We set out to raise $1,000 to help this person, but we had no idea how to fundraise.
Then you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
That is unacceptable, and that is not the way to run a board.
Who is this girl, and what's the thought process when you're like, do I include a nickel?
And it snowballs like any peer-to-peer campaign. The more people that view this content, the further and further it grows.
The community raised $55 million in 2019.
The more nonprofits can give their donor base that experience of the impact that's being made on the ground level, there's nothing else you have to give someone. This is Nonstop Nonprofit. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us. For the listeners today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what Twitch is, and what you do at Twitch?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Alyssa Sweetman, and you might see me go by Allie online from time to time, and that's because my online handle's AllieCat. And so when I meet people in person, they just assume my first name is Allie. So I just roll with it because it's way easier. I've been at Twitch since June of 2017, and my role at Twitch has evolved just from charity to also doing diversity programming. So with charities, I focus on education. I teach nonprofits how to interact with the community, best practices, kind of teach them a little bit about the platform. It can be overwhelming. It's like using any website for the first time, and it's user-generated content, so there's a lot of it.
Awesome.
Twitch is just a platform for people to create content, live content.
What drew you to work at Twitch?
So it's really interesting. I have played video games since I was a small child. My dad got me into it back when there was that block Sega portable
I remember
thing,
that.
and the battery lasted for like 2 hours, so you had to sit by a plug if you wanted to play it. So it's essentially useless. But so I've played video games my entire life, and when I was in college, my partner at the time was like, "Oh, you should stream on Twitch in your spare time. You're already playing video games. You might make some money off of it." I don't think that my partner had in mind that I was going to get into charity streaming when I started. Shortly after, I joined a group, and I was like, "Oh, wow, charity streaming. I didn't know that this was a thing. You're telling me I can basically volunteer without getting off my butt. I'm down for this." So I dived headfirst into it, got really active with the org. When the org kind of dissolved for various reasons, I didn't want to stop, so I founded another one with my friend. We call it Gallant Gamers, and mainly because we just wanted something that said GG.
Nice.
And shortly after we started that, my boss reached out to me and was like, "I'm looking for a second person to work with nonprofits. I'm reaching out to people in the community that really know nonprofits, the space, and how to work with influencers." And so I was invited to fill out an application and interview. During this time, I was a second grade teacher. So it's kind of how I shifted to that.
It's super fascinating. I mean, I think a lot of people, I remember, so I used to work at Invisible Children, and we got coined for a while for promoting collectivism, right? Give all these young people get them to care about something, but all they do is share posts and write comments, and so forth. But what we've seen over the last, decade is that these have become some of the strongest advocates for social causes. And you talked about charity streaming. So can you expand on that? What does that mean? What actually goes into charity streaming, and why is it something that you're so passionate about?
So in terms that nonprofits will understand, it is crowdfunding on the internet with a live feed, basically.
Okay.
And the person who's in the live feed is advocating for people watching the live feed to donate money. In a little bit more markety influencer terms, it's somebody who's creating content and they have prepared incentives, rewards, and they are asking the people watching, their fan base, to donate to a cause that they're passionate about. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been really passionate about helping people, and I like the idea of being able to bake it into your everyday life, because it can be really hard to go out of your way to do something. And so making it easy, like you're already streaming, you're already playing video games or painting or whatever it is you're doing while you're live streaming, you can plan it out and add in a little extra fun and raise money for charity.
And how is like the culture at, like, with obviously there's lots of content creators and broadcasters on Twitch. Would you say that like this idea of like streaming for charity is a big part of like the Twitch culture, or is it newer that's kind of like seeping in and more content creators want to become a part of it? Like, what's your sense for like how important is this to the Twitch community?
So I would say that it was a slow roll at first, starting back 2011 when Twitch launched. Like, looking at the numbers, it was pretty low, and looking at it now, the community raised 55 million in 2019, which
wow.
is that's crazy. And in 2018, I believe we raised 46, if I'm remembering that number correctly. It was either 42 or 46. But either way, that's like a huge growth. And I would say that it's a big part of Twitch's identity and culture. But given that we have 2 or 3 million content creators on the platform, that there's still so many more people that could get involved. So
yeah. What would you say, like, in terms of, because we talk about there's for nonprofits, there's obviously all sorts of different ways to fundraise, right? Whether it's online, offline, and so forth. We've been talking a lot here at Fundraise about the importance of nonprofits to really start tapping into this market, because it seems relatively untapped, and also it's a demographic of people who care about creating content, right? And nonprofits typically should care about creating content. And some of them are very bad at it, but that's okay. That's a podcast for another day. But like, where do you see like the market going with like streaming? Do you see it to continue to grow? Do you see it to becoming a mainstream fundraising channel for nonprofits, or what are your thoughts around that?
In general, we're talking a lot about live stream fundraising, but I like to take it even a step further back and look at it a bigger picture and think about it as influencer marketing. So thinking of it as influencer fundraising. And I really see that it's something that can be taken off. I think a lot of nonprofits are, in my experience, what they're typically afraid of are getting started is not super scalable, because it's about building one-on-one relationships. Then there's the issue of, well, if this influencer is fundraising for me, does this mean that I'm endorsing everything this fundraiser does? And then particularly with Twitch, we get lots of questions about things like the content, the game content that they're playing, whether it be a shooter or a horror game or things like that. Nonprofits really want to control the content of the influencer, which when speaking with them and explaining to them that you're not paying them to do something for you, you're not asking them to create new content, you're just simply asking them to add a fundraising component to their stream. And you can't really ask someone to change their content. It won't go well with their fan base.
Right.
And a lot of nonprofits really get nervous about those factors.
So maybe from your experience and seeing a nonprofit that's done this really well, that hasn't come in and have tried to hijack like the content, like, do you have an example of like a specific example or from a high level perspective of like what's a nonprofit that's been successful at like reaching out to an influencer and allowing them to continue just doing their stream, and what were the results, and how was money actually raised through live streaming video games? Like, walk us through that. Like, I think the biggest question mark nonprofits have is like, wait a second, you're telling me that people are going to donate money watching someone play a game for my charity. How does that, like, help us unpack that so they understand how that works?
Yeah, so I think the first part of it is when I work with a nonprofit, I try to explain to them that the game or the content they're creating is just the avenue of the content creation, and to think more of each individual streamer as a mini business owner. They're creating marketing, they're branding, they're making deals for themselves, they're managing relationships, they're doing so much more than what you see online. And in some cases, they design their own stuff and do their own video editing. And usually that kind of clicks with them, like, okay, this is just like I would work with a celebrity or a business. And so it starts off with, they're like, so how do I identify creators that might be passionate about my cause? And I say, well, unless you follow them on Twitter and they explicitly say it, you have no way. I was like, if they see an email, feel free to email them. If their DMs are open, feel free to DM them. And I always kind of set the expectation that creators, particularly large ones, get hit up all the time, and to not to be too upset if they don't get back to you. And especially a lot of feedback I get from creators is, if I don't email back, it's because I don't want to say no, but I don't have the bandwidth, or maybe it's not a cause they're too passionate about at the time. 2 nonprofits that I think that I worked with, Wounded Warrior Project and Movember, have really done great jobs. Movember started off a little bit slow, and then I've been working with them all the time that I've been at Twitch, and they've really grown so much so that they hired someone to manage the relationships with influencers in the Twitch space. And nonprofits that do well typically hire someone
to manage the, I mean, like you would hire someone to manage, a group
any
of
other
donors,
type of program.
any type of work, someone specific. And does that person, if I'm going to hire someone, does that person have to come from like the gaming industry, or what would you say are like the core competencies or characteristics of the type of person that you should hire?
So if you can hire from the community, that's always good. But typically what people will do is they'll hire someone in the community that they think has a lot of clout or a lot of reach, and kind of lean on them to know what to do when they get hired. But the types of questions I tell nonprofits are, tell me a type of program you think would run. I would ask them basically marketing-based questions.
Okay.
I would ask them questions you might see on a go-to-market or a program proposal. I would give them a scenario. I would say, like, an example that's pretty easy to use is the Alzheimer's Association has the longest day. If I was working there and interviewing someone to take on that program, I would say, can you think of some ways that we can incorporate or market to streamers to participate, to fundraise on the longest day? And really understanding that just because someone in the streaming industry has a little bit of knowledge, or they are a streamer, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be good to hire. And on the flip side of that, hiring someone directly who has a very heavy marketing background, also from traditional companies, has a hard time working with influencers, because again, they want to put the people they're working with or asking to fundraise in this box. So it's a little bit of a balance. You're looking for someone that's a self-starter, that is creative with coming up with ideas, and has a little bit of a marketing background. And if they don't have a marketing background, at least somebody who can formulate a plan.
Right. Okay. And we hear often, live streaming is great for fundraising. And a question I have is, 2 years ago, I was watching a live stream from Charity Water, and I was watching it virtually, and they were raising money for their cause. And their program, one of their program officers came on camera. I think it was like in Uganda or something like that. And they were getting ready to dig a well, and they wanted the people at this gala in New York City to basically see water shoot up from the ground, because it was $20,000, something like that, to build a well. And so they're trying to take their audience live to the actual work on the ground. And it was impactful. I mean, they raised, millions of dollars that night. Do you see anyone on Twitch or any nonprofits that are using Twitch as a platform to also like share, to use it as just marketing their programs or their work, or as an engagement strategy with maybe their support base? Do you see any sort of use case like that, or is there opportunities for there to be use case like that?
I would say that that's the one place that nonprofits are not utilizing well enough.
Okay.
I would say the best ones I've seen so far are nonprofits that are focused with animals, because they're looking at showcasing shelters, or I'm working with an elephant sanctuary and I'm working on helping them get their camera feeds up on Twitch. But there's a huge opportunity to showcase on Twitch what the work is that they're doing. I think the thing that makes it hard is that a live audience, think about it like your favorite TV show. Your favorite TV show comes on at the same day, same hour, every week. You know when you can watch it. And for people who create live content, it's important that whatever schedule they make, they kind of stick to.
Okay.
So nonprofits might not have enough people or the bandwidth to create regular content, even if the content is only once or twice a week. That consistency is really key.
Yeah, that makes sense. When someone's going live, so you're gonna tune in, set a reminder, whatever it takes to watch.
There is a rescue zoo that I worked with in Denmark. Their Twitch channel is Play Rescue. And it's a guy he inherited his family's zoo and he turned it into a rescue zoo, taking in animals around Europe that shouldn't be there. And he mostly plays video games and talks about his work, but a couple times a month he'll like do an IRL stream where he goes around the zoo and he'll like talk about the different animals they have and stuff like that.
Oh,
and
wow.
that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what you see with nonprofits, and if you think about creating like a fundraising strategy as a nonprofit, like the thing that you want to do is you want to create a strategy where you're not always just asking someone to give, right? Where you're actually getting them bought into what you're actually doing and accomplishing. And so it seems like Twitch would just be such a great opportunity for organizations to build up an audience, right? And it's an audience that, and maybe it's harder to be as consistent as, some of these other broadcasters and influencers. But if you're able to create some marketing around when you're going to go live and so forth, it seems like it could be a really good opportunity for organizations to build transparency with their donor base, to actually show the proof of like what they're accomplishing. It sounds like the zoo was doing just that. And I wonder if that would impact next time they went to fundraise, through Twitch or through an influencer on Twitch, if it would impact their overall fundraising efforts.
If you're looking at the way generations donate, if you look at, I think the first thing I remember being super successful in terms of something that was ridiculously overpriced, but it gave somebody something somewhere else, is Tom-Toms.
Okay.
Remember their shoes when they first came out? They're really nice shoes now, but when they first came out, they were these really crappy canvas, uncomfortable shoes, and all my friends had them, and they were so excited because they were like, I was in school and they were so excited. They were like, yeah, my mom got me these shoes, and it provides X number of pairs of shoes for somebody in another country who doesn't have access to shoes. And if you look at it, people will spend millennials and Zoomers, which is apparently the official name for Gen Z now.
Zoomers? I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, they're the equal opposites of boomers, apparently.
Interesting. Zoomers. They got a better title than us, millennials. I don't know.
Yeah.
No,
millennial has just become this catch-all phrase.
Yeah.
And so is like also the phrase "okay, boomer." I'm just so over all these little marketing things. But
would you say, what's the primary generation on Twitch? Is it Zoomers, or is it a mixture of?
It's really a mixture. I think the last public piece of information I saw was our average user is 15 to 36 or 7.
Okay. And I think that's another, when I've talked to nonprofits about specifically like live stream fundraising, or just like more low dollar fundraising is what I call it. Like the resistance we often get is, a 15-year-old doesn't have any money. Like is 15-year-old really going to donate? And, when going
Their
back to
parents have money.
Exactly. They have a disposable income that's greater than a lot of young adults. And because they get excited about something, passionate, and they'll go ask their parents for 15, 20, whatever it might be. And so I think that targeting young donors is such an important strategy, because they're the gateway to larger donations to their parents and so forth.
Nonprofits are also be like, oh, we don't really have an audience in the Twitch market. And I'm like, do you know how many people in your life play video games? Do you know how many people know of Twitch? And it's something that people don't talk about. I remember when I was teaching and I was segueing into this, and I told everyone I was leaving to do it. And even before this happened, we'd do our Friday roundup of, what has everyone got going on this weekend? And I'd be like, oh, I have a charity gaming event. And I would always get weird looks. It was something they had a hard time comprehending. And so it's really easy to dismiss it, but that's because everyone's looking at it as gamers. And I try to tell people, don't use the word gamer, use streamer, broadcaster, content creator, something that helps you remember that they're small business owners. And when they look at it in that approach, they tend to shift.
Okay, interesting. I think that that's, within like our own customer base, we're looking at like millions of donors. And we've had this conversation when we were building out an integration with Twitch. We're like, is there any way for us to find out, are any of the donors in our database gamers, and would they be excited about telling their organization, or I shouldn't call them gamers after what you just told me, but influencers or creators. Anyways, so it's like, could they help organizations get past this barrier of like, we don't know anyone in the space, it's not our market? That could be interesting.
Some organizations, some nonprofits do a really great job when they get reached out to. They're like, oh, okay, like I didn't realize that this is something, and they'll sign up on a platform that allows for fundraising on Twitch. And I just do want to clarify for anybody that's listening or watching that Twitch is not the fundraising platform. You won't raise any money through Twitch services. All streamers use a third-party service. And then some are really resistant and they're like, gaming doesn't align with our brand. This is not something that we're interested in. And then, there'll be an article that comes out and so did a charity stream and it raised, $30,000 and how exciting that is. And then that same nonprofit will be like, okay, maybe gaming is part of our thing.
Yeah.
But like I said, part of that whole mindset is like shifting from gamers to content creators. They're gamers, but they're also business owners.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm a really strong believer in the word choices we use help shape how we view things. And so because even when I think of a gamer, I think of like me on Saturday morning eating cereal and playing video games, even as an adult, and gamers don't necessarily need to be people who are live streaming either. So that's even a separate market from influencers. Yeah. And a fun tidbit I always like to share is that I read an article put out by a gamer research company that says that women with stay-at-home wives or mothers are the largest segment of gamers in America.
Really? Interesting.
The reason being is that when people think of gamers, they don't count Candy Crush or Clash of Clans or the word search puzzles on their phone. And it's like, those are all games too.
Does it count the very last game I played, very last video game I played was GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. Would you consider me a gamer?
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved that game. That was my Saturday and Sundays.
I remember we had a TV and you pause it. You never turned it off.
You would pause wherever you were in the game. You'd pause it.
No, you don't turn it off.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That is next level. One thing that I also hear nonprofits talk a lot about when they talk about live streaming is they reference St. Jude, because St. Jude, I think, has raised tens of millions through, and it's been on Twitch, not through Twitch, but utilizing the Twitch platform. How have they been so effective at being able to raise as much that they have raised? And it's typically in like a 24-hour period or something like that. So tell us, what is the secret sauce there?
Yeah, so you're mixing two up there. So the one that's a 24-hour period is Extra Life. Okay. And I believe they were the very first organization fundraising on Twitch. And for Extra Life in particular, it was kind of like a lightning strike. They had already developed a program called Extra Life. It's the CMNH Hospital Group. And that was born out of playing video games and board games with your friends and getting people in real life to donate to your cause before Twitch even existed. So they already had like a base of people who were doing it, but they weren't doing it online. And so when Twitch came up, it made easy sense to translate. So it was like a really easy lightning strike. For St. Jude, they were the second nonprofit to get involved on Twitch. And it started with, I love the way Zach tells this story. He got started, he was working on their website and he was like, hey, this is going to be big. And St. Jude is like, we're not even sure what you're talking about. Sure, go try it out. And he did. And it's wildly successful. He's a wonderful human. And kind of the secret sauce for St. Jude is just that one-on-one building relationships, talking with people, really spreading the mission and understanding that you're not talking to a board member, you're talking to another person and you got to connect on a person level. One of the things nonprofits ask me is like, oh, should we start a gaming Twitter? And I'm like, no, don't treat it as an other. You don't have a Twitter for people who do walkathons and a Twitter for people who do crowdfunding. It's just a part of it.
Right.
St. Jude, Save the Children, Wounded Warrior Project, Movember, all of those. And others have how to get involved. On their how to get involved page, it says do a live stream fundraiser.
Oh,
and it kind of connects to whatever their third-party platform is.
Yeah.
For those tools.
So for an organization that's thinking about trying out live stream fundraising in 2020, where should they get started? What are the best three things that you could say would help them get on the right track? So first and foremost, I would say the first step is to write a simple one-pager, and don't go to your website and copy all of the hundreds of programs that you have. Some nonprofits have so many programs. Think about the ones that are most impactful and make the most sense, and write bite-sized blurbs. I always make the joke that the streamer needs to be able to remember the sentence
and they need to be able to say it in between 360 no scope, their next rank up, whatever else they've got going on their stream, because when they're doing a charity stream, that's an addition to everything else they're already doing. So make the information easy to remember, make it impactful. Impact statements, I always talk about the way an impact statement is worded. It's funny that we were talking about RAD earlier. My favorite impact statement is from RAD.
Oh, cool.
So their impact statement that they tell streamers is, for every $35 raised, RAD is able to provide a therapy session for someone in need. Name of the nonprofit, how much, the price point of the donation that gets something done, what does it do, somebody in need who needs mental health assistance. And so that's really easy to get behind. And so making sure you have those points are really great.
Right. And then the influencer, as they're streaming, has these bullet points, has this information to...
And they'll use as much or as little as they want.
Right.
So that's the first part. Make sure that information is there. The second part, and I'm assuming that they've already signed up on a platform that they can connect with, that streamers can connect with and use. The second thing is that when you're reaching out to creators, just be really honest. One of the most interesting aspects of seeing things on Twitter is when a company does a mass email and it says, "Hi, insert streamer name. I was watching your stream the other day and I noticed that your stream is really great and I think you'd be really great for this program." People tend to screenshot those, mark out like emails and names, and then post them and say, "Hey, did anyone else get this email?" And then it turns into this really long thread. So I always tell nonprofits, be honest.
Yeah.
Send them an email saying, "Hey, I found your email on Twitter. I found your email on your Twitch channel. We're getting started in this space." Authenticity is the best tool anyone can have. And have one person focus on it, or two people, somebody for a face. Every single one of the successful nonprofits has a single person that streamers can say, "Oh, I know so-and-so at that nonprofit." And, for St. Jude, it's Zach. For Extra Life, there's a few of them. There's Lou and Brandon. For Stand Up to Cancer, there's Andy. Like, I could list off the people that handle these programs, and they're the people that interact in face, because it's kind of counterintuitive to most nonprofits the way they think, but since it's an influencer, they also need to be influenced by the person.
Right.
And so a nameless organization, unless they're super passionate about the cause, is not as likely to move the needle as becoming friends with someone, because then you become friends with that person.
Right.
You care about their program being successful, you care about their nonprofit, and then it's really easy to buy into what that nonprofit's doing, even if you already care about it. Because when you think about it, what's preventing any creator from going to any of your basic, albeit boring, crowdfunding pages, creating a crowdfunding page and asking people to donate? What's the difference there?
Yeah.
And the same thing with viewers donating to streamers' campaigns. They could easily go to a nonprofit's website and make that donation. So being mindful of the fact that this is completely different, and your relationship building is less with donors and more with the people asking for the donations.
Right.
So those are the first two things. And then the third thing is appreciate the influencers you work with. Through either your personal Twitter, I recommend people that are running the programs, like put it in your Twitter bio, get active on Twitter with streamers, or if you can from your main organization's Twitter, when someone tweets out, "Oh, I just raised $1,000 for AFSP," and AFSP responding saying, "Thanks, that's great," can really boost other people see that AFSP is interested.
So it adds an element of like social pressure too. I mean, not social pressure, but like social recognition that like, people are being recognized for their contribution, and it's fun to be a part of that.
And when you think about it, for every issue you can think of, there's probably 10 to 100 nonprofits working on that issue. And so what differentiates them is, do they recognize the streaming space? Because it's a new industry in particular, people are looking for the people that are paying attention to their industry and aren't treating them more like an ATM or a number. One piece of feedback I get from streamers is people who participate in other fundraising campaigns, it's like right as soon as they finish with that fundraising campaign, they'll get 10 emails from 10 different nonprofits asking them to do one.
Yeah. And
it's really interesting because I don't think nonprofits, when they remind them that there's a business owner, there's another element of that. When a streamer so streamers create content for free, and all of the money they make is voluntary based on their viewers, so tips or subscriptions or people who cheer bits in their channel. And when a streamer asks for donations to charity, they're essentially saying, "I don't want any money today. or however long, please, please, please donate it to this charity.
Wow.
This is what I'm doing. And they put a lot of work into it. Often they spend money to buy things like Bean Boozled or pies to put on their face or other incentives that they do. They dye their hair. I've seen people get tattoos, shave their eyebrows, all of these really crazy things. And in addition to that, they're asking people not to tip them, not to give them money. And I always say, can you think of another job that asks you to come into work, do your work, and then give up your income that day for something?
No, it's crazy.
So anytime when looking for streamers to work with, be mindful of, are you emailing someone that you are emailing because you just saw them complete a campaign? Like it's kind of one of those things of like...
It's just used, I mean, the same way in which you would go about, prospecting for donors to your organization, right? The way that you would work at cultivating relationships, building relationships, be respectful, right? And be aware of the interests of the person, what they care about, why do they care about the issue maybe you're working on, and what their involvement is. Do you see this as a problem with streamers where they're not getting appreciated enough, and it's causing streamers maybe not to do it as often, or have there just been some bad examples? And
It kind of depends. I've seen some streamers just kind of turned off by marketing. It could be any variation that somebody could be turned off from it, but also understanding that, in my opinion, I think the sweet spot of number of events that a streamer could do, still maintain their livelihood and not over exhaust their community, is probably 4 events a year.
Okay.
And like really spacing those out, because you need time for all those people to recover. Because when a streamer is going to do a charity event, they usually like tell their community for 2 weeks to a month out.
Okay.
And then even when I've done one, my viewers are like, oh, we'll save up. And like people do save up for hitting those milestones and goals.
Right. So would love to hear from your perspective, what are some of the more exciting projects that you're working on this year that you're just really excited to be a part of and to share?
I'm really excited working on a project focused on affecting diversity in the charity world. I've noticed from going to nonprofit conventions and speaking how incredibly white it is. A lot of nonprofits are typically focused on people who are people of color or come from low income, really understanding that the people who are trying to solve these problems don't necessarily represent the people that are trying to solve the problem.
Right.
And I can't affect the whole entire nonprofit industry with that aspect, but I am working on mentoring groups of 10 to 15 streamers at a time who have an interest in being changing into the nonprofit industry. And I'm kind of going over how to think about when looking at a nonprofit's website, how to think about building a program or writing a go-to-market, and really going through these steps. And then they're doing a mock project where they're doing all of that. So I would just say that when looking and hiring, be very mindful that representation is important, and that the online space for a very long time is mostly white dudes, and that the online space is not always very welcoming to people of color and women, and that when you're hiring, be mindful of working with people with more diverse backgrounds. That'll also increase your ability to work with more diverse influencers. I like to compare the streaming industry, or really in any new industry, when talking about diversity, to venture capitalism. Because if you look at it, venture capitalist firms were considered women and people of color much higher risk factors when investing in their companies, and so they wouldn't. So you saw people of color only venture capitalist and women venture capitalist groups spring up, and they're wildly successful. And so I think just really understanding that that's a big part of the market that's untapped, even on Twitch when talking with nonprofits. And then, so I started noticing it myself, and then what drove me to be actionable on it was a nonprofit that came to me and they said, I noticed that most of our fundraisers are white and mostly male, and how do we fix this, and how do we address this? And so I went to Twitter and was like, hey, streamer friends that are people of color, can you help me out with some stuff? And really great woman responded and gave me all kinds of tons of feedback. We went back and forth, and all on her own, she took it, ran with it. She did a 3-hour podcast talking about being a person of color and working with charities.
Wow.
And it was just really great. And some nonprofits, I let the nonprofit know, and so several nonprofits tuned in, and it was really good. And it's really great that charities in this space are thinking about how do we address, how do we get better, how do we interact with people better.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that project and that work.
Thank you.
It's very important. The last question I have as we wrap up here is, so how do nonprofits, do they get in touch with you, or do they get in touch with Twitch if they're thinking about getting started and wanting to jump in and be educated on this whole new world that so many of them probably have so many questions about still? What's the best way for them to basically reach out or get in touch?
charity@twitch.tv.
Okay. So there's
super easy.
Yeah, very easy. But thank you so much for coming in
absolutely.
today and teaching us more about what Twitch is doing and how it's looking at the nonprofit space and fundraising. Very important work. We're very honored to have you here. So thank you for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's
Absolutely.
great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit. This podcast is brought to you by your friends at Fundraise, nonprofit fundraising software built by nonprofit people. If you'd like to continue the conversation, find me on LinkedIn or text me at 562-242-8160. And don't forget to get your next episode the second it hits the internets. Go to nonstopnonprofitpodcast.com and sign up for email notifications today. See you next time.